My daughter kicked me out of her house after I refused to serve her mother-in-law like a maid. She's wealthy, and she made sure everyone knew it. Serve her dinner, then go clean the bathroom, my daughter said. I cried quietly that night, but what I did afterward left everyone speechless. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and comment where you're watching from so I can see how far my story travels. I never imagined my own daughter would make me feel so small. At 64, I thought I'd already faced every kind of pain life could offer. But standing in Amara's kitchen that evening, I realized I was wrong. Amara was rushing around, adjusting the flowers for the third time. "Mom, make sure the silverware is lined up perfectly," she called. "Harriet notices everything. This dinner has to be perfect." I ran my fingers along the polished forks and knives, my hands trembling not from age, but from the anxious energy of the day. Harriet Whitmore was coming for dinner, Elliot's mother, a woman who practically owned half the town and carried herself like royalty. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. "Get the door, Mom," Amara whispered, straightening her dress. "And remember what we talked about, okay?" Those words still echoed in my chest. Earlier, she'd sat me down like a child. "Harriet expects a certain standard of service," she'd said. "Just be helpful. Do whatever she needs." I opened the door, and there she was, dressed in a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my rent. She didn't greet me. She simply handed me the coat as if it were obvious what I should do with it. Elliot appeared right behind her, kissing his mother on the cheek. "Mom, you look wonderful," he said warmly. "How was the drive from the club?" "Awful," she replied sharply, settling into the chair Amara had picked out just for her. "The traffic on 5th Street is barbaric. Someone should fix it." I stood there holding her coat, waiting for someone to tell me where to put it. No one did, so I quietly hung it in the hallway and went back to the dining room. Dinner started 20 minutes later. I'd spent the entire afternoon cooking: beef Wellington, roasted asparagus, and a chocolate soufflé, Harriet's favorites. My feet ached, but I wanted everything perfect for Amara. "Yvonne," Harriet said finally as I placed her salad on the table. It was the first time she'd spoken my name all evening. "This dressing is too sour." "I can make a new one," I offered quickly. "No need," Amara interrupted with a tight smile. "Mom, just use the regular ranch from the fridge." My heart sank. Ranch dressing. For the salad I'd made with herbs from my own garden. Still, I nodded and went to fetch it. When I returned, Harriet was describing her recent cruise. "The service was impeccable," she said. "The staff anticipated every need before you even asked. That's real hospitality." She looked at me pointedly as I placed the bottle beside her plate. Dinner only got worse from there. She complained about the meat, the vegetables, even how I folded the napkins. Each remark stung, but what hurt most was seeing my daughter agree with her. "You're right, Harriet," Amara said softly. "Mom, could you please rewash the glasses?" I took them to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I dried each one with a new towel. From the other room, I heard their laughter, light, easy, and painfully distant. By dessert, I felt like a shadow in my own child's home. When Harriet finished her coffee, she raised the cup without even looking at me. When her napkin fell, she waited for me to pick it up. And then came the final blow. "Yvonne," she said, standing with a faint smile. "I'd like to freshen up before I go. Please make sure the powder room is spotless." For a moment, I couldn't move. She wanted me to clean the bathroom, right in front of my daughter. I looked at Amara, hoping she'd say something, anything, but she just looked away. Instead of defending me, my daughter smiled, bright and eager. "Of course, Harriet," she said sweetly. "Mom, make sure everything's perfect in there. Check the hand towels, wipe the mirror, no streaks." Her words lingered in the air like a poison cloud. My daughter, the same girl I'd raised alone after her father walked away, the woman whose tuition I'd paid, whose rent I'd covered, whose tears I'd wiped through every heartbreak. And now she was asking me to scrub a bathroom for her mother-in-law's approval. I froze. Harriet looked expectant. Elliot shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. And Amara, she looked impatient, like I was being dramatic for hesitating. She's rich, Amara said sharply. Serve her properly, and then go clean the bathroom. This is important to us, Mom. Those words cut deeper than any blade could. Something inside my chest, something small and fragile that had kept me steady for years, broke in that moment. But I nodded. What else could I do? This was her house, her marriage, her life I was supposedly helping to protect. I walked toward the powder room, my eyes blurry from tears I refused to let fall. As I knelt beside the toilet with a brush in my hand, their voices carried through the thin walls. They sounded happy again, laughing, as if the tension a few minutes earlier had never happened. And then I heard it. She's actually quite useful, Harriet's voice said. So obedient. You've trained her well. And then Amara's laugh, light, pleased, proud. She knows her place now. It just took a little time to get her there. I froze, staring at my reflection in the water I'd just cleaned. For the first time, I saw myself not as a mother, not as family, just convenient. The realization hit so hard I had to grip the sink to stay upright. Was this really my life now? Being useful until the day I wasn't? That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their voices again. So obedient. You've trained her well. Their laughter replayed in my mind like a cruel melody that refused to fade. By morning, I convinced myself maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Amara hadn't meant it that way. Maybe daylight would soften everything. Maybe we could talk and find our way back. When I found her in the kitchen, she was still in her silk robe, scrolling through her phone while her coffee sat untouched. For just a moment, I thought I saw something gentle in her eyes. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said carefully, pouring myself a cup from the pot she'd brewed. "Thank you for letting me stay over. I was too tired to drive last night." She nodded absently, her eyes never leaving the screen. Harriet texted this morning. She said she was really impressed with dinner. "That's wonderful," I said softly, sitting across from her. I held the mug tight between my hands, trying to find warmth. "Amara, I wanted to talk about last night." Her fingers stopped scrolling. "What about it?" "I just felt uncomfortable," I began, choosing my words carefully. The way Harriet spoke to me, asking me to clean the bathroom, it didn't feel right. Amara set her phone down a little too hard. "Uncomfortable?" she repeated. "Mom, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm your mother, not the help," I said gently. "I was happy to cook and serve, but when she started ordering me around, and you went along with it." Her voice rose. "Went along with it? I was trying to make a good impression on my mother-in-law. Do you understand how important she is to our future, to Elliot's business?" "I understand she matters to you," I said quietly. "But I matter too. I'm your mother." Amara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "And as my mother, shouldn't you want what's best for me? Shouldn't you want to help me succeed?" "Of course I do," I said. "But nothing." She snapped, pacing across the kitchen. "Do you even realize what Harriet could do for us? She knows people on the city council, the planning board. She could help Elliot's firm get contracts worth millions." I just stared at her. This wasn't the daughter I had raised. This was someone else entirely. "Amara, and you think the way to earn that is by humiliating your own mother?" "Humiliating?" She spun around, her voice sharp. "You think serving dinner and cleaning a bathroom is humiliating? You know what's really humiliating, Mom? Having a mother who's so proud she can't see the bigger picture." The words struck like a slap. "Amara, listen to yourself," I whispered. "You're asking me to act like a stranger in your own home? And you're acting like someone who thinks she's too good to help her daughter," she shouted back. Her voice grew higher, angrier. "You know what your problem is, Mom? You've always been jealous." I froze. "Jealous?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Jealous of what?" "Of my success, my marriage, the life I built." "You never had any of this," Amara said coldly. "Dad left you with nothing, and you've spent your whole life resenting anyone who has more than you do." Her cruelty took the air from my lungs. "How can you say that to me?" I whispered. I worked 2 jobs to put you through college. I gave up everything, dating, happiness, even rest, just so you could have a future." Amara's expression didn't waver. "And now you want me to pay for that forever, is that it? You want me to sacrifice my future because you made choices that didn't work out?" Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I just want you to treat me with basic respect." "Respect?" She laughed, but it wasn't a laugh. It was a weapon. "Mom, what do you even bring to this family? You don't have money like Harriet. You don't have connections. All you can offer is service, and even that comes with complaints." Each word hit like a hammer to the heart. This was my daughter, the child I had cradled in my arms, kissed goodnight, encouraged through every dream. And now, she looked at me like I was nothing. "I brought you love," I whispered. "A mother's love. Love doesn't pay the bills, Mom. Love doesn't build a future." At that moment, Elliot appeared in the doorway, half awake, hair tousled, trying to read the room. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, though we all knew it wasn't. Amara turned toward him immediately, her voice suddenly calm. "I was just explaining to Mom that she needs to be more accommodating when Harriet visits." Elliot rubbed the back of his neck. "Mom did seem a little tense last night," he said quietly. Harriet noticed. "Noticed what?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. "Just that you seemed resistant to helping out," he said, eyes avoiding mine. "She mentioned you didn't look happy serving dinner." I stared at him in disbelief. "I cooked for 6 hours. I served every course. I cleaned your bathroom while you all laughed in the dining room." "But you did it with an attitude," Amara interrupted sharply. "Harriet could feel that you weren't happy about it. It made everyone uncomfortable." The words tore through me. "Of course I wasn't happy about it," I burst out. "I was being treated like a servant in my own daughter's home." "It's not your home, Mom," Amara said quietly. That simple sentence, calm, deliberate, cut deeper than all her shouting ever could. "This is our home, mine and Elliot's," she continued. "And in our home, we need people who support us, not make things harder." I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. "What are you saying?" Amara and Elliot exchanged a look, one of those silent glances that carries a decision. Then she straightened, her tone cool and businesslike. "I'm saying you need to decide what kind of relationship you want with us. If you want to be part of this family, then accept your role. Help when we ask without complaints. Make Harriet feel respected when she visits." "And if I don't?" I asked, another glance between them. This time, Elliot spoke. "Then maybe it's best if you don't come over when Harriet's here," he said softly. "Maybe some distance would help everyone think about what really matters." The kitchen fell silent. Only the clock ticking and the hum of the refrigerator filled the space between us. I looked at my daughter, searching her face for even a flicker of the child I once knew. But she wasn't there, just a stranger who carried my blood, but none of my heart. "So those are my choices?" I asked quietly. "Be your servant, or be gone." Amara's jaw tightened. "Don't be dramatic, Mom. We're just asking you to be helpful, to be part of the team." "The team," I repeated softly. "And what position am I playing?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I saw it in her eyes. I wasn't family anymore. I was staff. I stood slowly, feeling every one of my 64 years pressing down on me. "I need to go home," I said. "Mom," Amara started, but I lifted a hand to stop her. "I need to think about what you've said and what you've become." I climbed the stairs to gather my things, each step heavier than the last. Downstairs, I could hear them whispering, low, careful, like they didn't want me to hear. Maybe I didn't want to. In the mirror of the guest room, I caught my reflection. A woman I barely recognized looked back, weary, small, broken. When had I turned into someone who could be dismissed so easily by her own child? By the time I reached my car, I heard the front door open. "Mom, wait!" Amara called from the porch. I turned, and for one brief, foolish moment, I hoped she'd come to apologize, to take it all back. Instead, she stood there in her expensive robe, her arms folded, her voice cool. "Just think about what we discussed, okay? It doesn't have to be this complicated. We can still be a family." I looked at her, my beautiful, successful, heartless daughter, and something inside me finally let go. The last fragile thread of hope snapped. "You're right," I said quietly. "It doesn't have to be complicated at all," I said. Then I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing on her perfect porch in her perfect neighborhood, surrounded by a perfect life that no longer had space for me. A mother who only wanted to be treated as something more than furniture. But as I made the drive back to my small apartment, I couldn't shake a feeling deep in my chest. Something told me this story wasn't finished, and that the world my daughter thought was so flawless was built on much shakier ground than she realized. The first 3 days passed in a blur. Sleepless nights, half-eaten meals. My mind kept replaying every moment. The dinner, the words, the way she'd looked at me as if I were a stranger. My little apartment felt smaller than ever, like a box I'd been shut inside and forgotten. The silence was so loud it almost hummed. For years, even when Amara and I weren't close, she'd always been there, just a phone call away. Now that connection was gone. I wandered from room to room like a ghost, books I couldn't focus on, half-done chores I abandoned before finishing. Every wall held a photo: Amara's graduation, her wedding, holidays where we'd both been smiling. Had all of that been real? Or had I been fooling myself this whole time, just a supporting character in her story? On Thursday morning, I sat at the kitchen table staring at a cup of cold coffee when my laptop chimed. An incoming email. I almost ignored it. Bills, spam, the usual. But the sender's name caught my attention. Morrison & Associates, Amara's accounting firm. I frowned and opened it. Why would they contact me directly? Then I remembered, when she'd first started her interior design business 5 years ago, I'd helped her set it up. We'd listed me as a secondary contact for important documents since she traveled often, and I'd helped her secure her first loan. Technically, I was still listed as a partner. Not an active one, but a partner nonetheless. The message seemed routine. A monthly financial summary I usually ignored. But that morning, with too much time and too many thoughts, I clicked on the attachment. Rows of numbers filled the screen. Revenue, expenses, nothing unusual. Until something caught my eye. Under deposits, a line of entries made my pulse quicken. $5,000, $8,500, $12,000, each labeled the same way: H. Whitmore, personal, Harriet's money, going straight into Amara's business account. I leaned closer, reading again to be sure. The transfers were large, frequent, and dated back nearly 8 months. In all our conversations about the company, about how hard she'd worked to grow it, Amara had never mentioned taking money from Harriet. Why would she hide that? And why did the deposits seem to line up exactly with the time she began pressuring me to be more helpful when Harriet visited? Something was off. The numbers told a story Amara hadn't shared. I opened older reports, scrolling month by month. The pattern repeated: regular, substantial payments from Harriet's personal account, but no paperwork, no contracts, no formal records of investment, no agreement of any kind, just the money. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I still had contacts at the bank that handled Amara's business accounts, people who remembered me from when I'd helped her open them. Maybe they could explain. "Mrs. Chen, this is Yvonne Hartwell," I began when she answered. "Amara Hartwell Morrison's business partner. I hope I'm not disturbing you?" Mrs. Chen's voice was warm, familiar. "Yvonne, it's been ages. How are you? How's everything going with the business?" "That's what I'm calling about," I said carefully. I was reviewing our latest financial reports and noticed several large deposits from H. Whitmore. I wanted to confirm that everything's properly documented. There was a pause. "The Whitmore transfers?" she repeated. "Yes, those have been quite regular. Is something missing from your records?" "Well, that's just it," I said. "I can't find any signed agreements, no partnership, no investment forms." Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, Her tone had changed. "I'm looking at the notes right now," she said slowly. "And these are labeled as family contributions, not formal investments. Amara told us they were personal gifts from her mother-in-law to support business growth." My blood ran cold. "Gifts?" "That's correct. They're recorded as family gifts, not loans, not equity investments, just contributions." See?" I managed to say. I thanked her and hung up, my hand still trembling around the phone. Gifts. Harriet was supposedly gifting Amara thousands of dollars every month? That didn't sound right. Harriet Whitmore wasn't known for generosity. She was known for control. And something deep inside me told me this. This was the beginning of something much bigger than I'd ever imagined. From everything I'd ever seen of their relationship, Harriet wasn't the generous type. She was demanding, controlling, a woman who kept a running tally of every favor and expected repayment with interest. And that thought wouldn't leave me alone. During that awful dinner, while she'd been criticizing every dish and treating me like staff, I'd sensed something deeper. She enjoyed it. She liked the feeling of power, of being the one everyone tried to please. Would someone like that really hand over thousands of dollars every month, with no strings attached? The more I thought about it, the colder I felt. I spent the rest of the day poring over every report I had access to, and a pattern began to emerge, one that made my stomach twist. The transfers had started small, 2,000 here, another there. But over time they grew larger, more frequent, and completely unrelated to any visible progress in Amara's business. There were no new clients, no expansion projects, no reason for that kind of money to appear. And worse, when I followed where the funds went next, it wasn't toward business costs. It was moving again, out of the company account and into personal ones. Money that was supposedly meant to help her studio grow was being used for something else entirely. Then I noticed the timing. The biggest transfers coincided with periods when, according to Harriet's public posts, she'd been traveling or unwell, times when she wouldn't have been checking her finances closely. A chill crept over me. It couldn't be what it looked like. Amara wouldn't take advantage of her. She might be cold, ambitious, obsessed with status, but dishonest? No, that couldn't be. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Harriet really was investing quietly and didn't want it made official. Maybe she was helping Amara and Elliot with personal expenses as a gesture of goodwill. There had to be an innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew better. The desperate need to impress Harriet, the forced politeness, the way she'd made me serve and clean like it was a test. It all fit together too neatly. If she'd been secretly taking money, the best way to keep Harriet feeling generous was to make her feel worshipped, important, powerful, to surround her with people who treated her like royalty, even me. And then the horrifying truth took shape. My humiliation that night hadn't been an accident. It had been part of the act, a scene in a performance designed to keep Harriet comfortable, confident, and blind. I closed my laptop and walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under a heavy gray sky, the clouds thick with unfallen rain. I pressed my palm to the glass, the coolness grounding me as the weight in my chest grew heavier. My daughter wasn't just unkind. If the numbers were real, she was doing something deeply wrong, taking advantage of someone vulnerable, hiding behind family ties to do it. And I had been part of the illusion, the obedient mother, the smiling hostess, the proof that everything was normal. It made me sick. All the while, Harriet felt admired. Amara got the money. And I was the tool that made it all believable. Tears filled my eyes, not just for losing my daughter, but for realizing who she truly was. The child I'd raised with love and sacrifice had become someone I no longer recognized, someone I wouldn't trust if we weren't related by blood. But as the tears dried, something inside me hardened. If Amara thought she could use me as a pawn in her scheme, she was wrong. I might be older, I might be alone, but I wasn't helpless. If she had built her life on lies, then it was time for those lies to meet the light. Harriet deserved to know exactly what kind of person her daughter-in-law truly was. Sleep was impossible after that discovery. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those numbers, $47,000 in total, flowing quietly from Harriet's personal account into Amara's business over 8 months. No paperwork, no reason, no conscience. By Friday morning, I knew what I had to do. I had to dig deeper, and I had to be ready for whatever I found. I couldn't go to Harriet with just suspicions. If I wanted the truth to stand, I needed proof, solid, undeniable evidence that no one could twist or explain away. So, I brewed a pot of coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. If my daughter was really taking money that didn't belong to her, there would be a trail. There always is. I logged into the company's online banking portal, something I hadn't done in years. Technically, I was still listed as a partner, so my credentials still worked. Or so I hoped. My heart pounded as I typed in the password, half expecting a rejection message. But after a long pause, the screen loaded, and what appeared made my stomach drop. The activity was far worse than I had imagined. Regular transfers from Harriet's account, yes, but also cash withdrawals and unexplained transfers to personal accounts that had nothing to do with the business. Money flowed in, and just as quickly, it flowed out. I began cross-checking dates, amounts, and social media posts. A $3,000 withdrawal the same day Amara posted photos from a luxury spa. An $8,500 transfer to Elliot's personal account a week before their trip to Napa Valley. Thousands of dollars spent, and not a single legitimate expense to justify it. The numbers didn't lie, but I needed to understand how she was doing it, how my daughter had gained access to that money in the first place, and then I remembered something from that dinner. Harriet had laughed and said how wonderful it was to have Amara handling her confusing financial matters. At the time, I thought it was just another condescending remark. Now, it sounded like the key to everything. I grabbed my phone and made a call I hadn't made in months, to the Riverside Country Club, where Harriet was a member. "Hello? This is Yvonne Hartwell," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I'm calling on behalf of Mrs. Harriet Whitmore. She asked me to confirm some details about her recent payments." It was risky, but places like that were used to assistants and relatives managing these things. "Of course, Ms. Hartwell," the receptionist replied politely. "What would you like to know?" "I just wanted to check whether her automatic payment arrangements are still in place," I said. "She's been unsure which bills are coming out of her account." A pause. Then the woman answered, "Yes, her membership fees, spa services, and dining minimums are all set to auto-withdraw, but I don't see anything business-related. Mrs. Whitmore did mention that her daughter-in-law manages most of her finances now. You might want to confirm directly with her bank." My pulse quickened. Amara was managing Harriet's accounts. That explained everything. The regular transfers, the perfect timing, the lack of oversight. Harriet had trusted Amara to help with her bills and everyday finances, and my daughter had used that access to quietly funnel money into her own accounts. The rest of the morning became a blur of quiet, careful calls. I reached out to contacts at banks, service providers, anyone who might reveal another piece of the puzzle. And what I found made my blood run cold. Amara hadn't just been given access. She had power of attorney over several of Harriet's financial matters. She could make transfers, pay bills, manage investments. Everything. On the surface, it made sense. Harriet was in her 70s, traveled often, and probably didn't want to deal with endless paperwork. But Amara was abusing that trust in the most meticulous way imaginable. Her transfers were subtle, calculated. Each one was structured just below the thresholds that might trigger alerts. The amounts varied slightly, enough to look natural. The timing matched moments when Harriet was distracted, on trips, at events, or recovering from illness. And the labels. Family support, business development, consulting services, all words that looked harmless on paper. It was deliberate, careful, systematic. And then I found the thing that broke me completely. While searching through old contacts, I stumbled upon Amara's private social media accounts, the ones she thought only close friends could see. I cross-referenced email addresses, usernames, and finally, there they were, posts going back nearly a year. casual, cruel, and breathtakingly arrogant. "Managing the old lady's money is easier than I thought," one post read. "She barely checks anything as long as she feels important." Another from 2 months earlier, "The trick is to make them feel generous. Let them think they're helping you. Play the devoted family member, and they'll fund whatever lifestyle you want." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, a cold wave washing over me. It wasn't just greed, it was mockery. Amara wasn't just taking advantage of Harriet's trust. She was laughing about it. For the first time, I saw my daughter for who she truly was. Not the ambitious woman I'd once admired, but someone who had turned empathy into a business strategy. And I knew in that moment there was no going back. The truth would have to come out, no matter what it cost. And then came the post that made me feel sick to my stomach. "Sometimes I can't believe how easy this is. She actually thanks me for helping with her finances. If she knew what I was really doing, she'd probably have a heart attack. LOL." I stared at the screen in horror. These weren't the words of someone who had simply made a bad choice or lost her way. They were the words of someone who took pleasure in the manipulation, who felt proud of it. My daughter wasn't just taking money she shouldn't. She was enjoying it. Then, completely out of the blue, the final piece of the puzzle arrived. While I was printing screenshots of her posts, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Elliot Morrison Architecture. "Mrs. Hartwell, this is Janet from Mr. Morrison's office," a polite voice said. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but we have a payment issue, and we're hoping you can clarify something." My pulse quickened. "What kind of issue?" "Well," she began, "we've been receiving monthly payments from a Mrs. H. Whitmore for several months, around $4,000 each. They're labeled as architectural consulting fees, but Mr. Morrison hasn't done any projects for Mrs. Whitmore, and we can't find any contracts." I felt the blood drain from my face. "These payments are going directly to Elliot's firm?" "Yes, ma'am. We've been setting the money aside until we know what to do with it. Mr. Morrison keeps saying he'll check on it, but he's been traveling. It's starting to look irregular." "How much are we talking about?" "Roughly $28,000 over the past 7 months. I thanked her and hung up, my hands shaking. It wasn't just Amara. Elliot was involved too. Together they had built a scheme that funneled money from Harriet's accounts straight into their own pockets. The rest of the day I worked in silence, printing statements, organizing screenshots, lining up phone records and receipts until my small kitchen table was covered in a sea of paper. Transfers from Harriet's accounts to Amara's business. Evidence of the same funds moving again, this time into personal accounts. Social media posts bragging about how simple it all was. Pictures of trips, spa weekends, luxury purchases, all paid for with money that didn't belong to them. By evening, I had a folder thick with proof, a story that couldn't be denied. Looking at it, I didn't feel triumph. I felt heartbreak. This was my daughter, the baby I'd rocked to sleep, the teenager I'd encouraged through every disappointment, the young woman whose dreams I'd financed with my own sacrifices. I had raised her to be strong and capable, never to take advantage of others, and yet here she was, smiling on social media while building a life funded by someone else's trust. The woman who had once called me Mom was now a stranger wearing my daughter's face. But Harriet, difficult, sharp-tongued Harriet, didn't deserve this. She had trusted her family to protect her, not deceive her. I gathered every page and sealed it in a manila folder. Tomorrow, I would drive to her estate and show her the truth. No matter what it cost me, because the daughter I once loved was already gone. The person in her place, the one living comfortably on someone else's money, wasn't the child I raised. The next morning, I set out before sunrise. The 40-minute drive felt endless. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and the folder on the passenger seat sat there like a silent weight. All night, I'd rehearsed the conversation in my mind. Would Harriet believe me? Would she think I was jealous or bitter or simply meddling? Would she even hear me out before sending me away? Each time those doubts crept in, I remembered that final post. "She thanks me for helping with her finances." Those words hardened my resolve. Whatever Harriet thought of me, she deserved to know the truth. When I reached the Whitmore estate, the iron gates loomed ahead, guarding 15 acres of manicured perfection. I'd only been here once, for Amara and Elliot's engagement party, and even then, I'd felt out of place among the marble fountains and rose gardens. I pressed the intercom button, my heart hammering. "This is Yvonne Hartwell. I need to speak with Mrs. Whitmore. It's urgent." A pause crackled through the speaker. "Mrs. Whitmore isn't expecting visitors today." "Please," I said. "It's about Amara and Elliot. It's extremely important." Another long pause. Then, with a low mechanical hum, the iron gates began to open, and I knew there was no turning back. The drive up the Whitmore estate felt endless. The long, winding road was lined with hedges so precisely trimmed they looked almost artificial, and a marble fountain glittered in the morning sun, a fountain that probably cost more than I'd earned in the last 5 years. The house itself rose beyond it, a grand Georgian mansion, all white columns and endless windows. It was beautiful, yes, but cold in that way only money can make something cold. When Harriet opened the front door, she looked exactly as I remembered. Immaculate. A cream-colored cashmere sweater, perfectly styled silver hair, makeup done with the precision of someone who'd been living under a spotlight her whole life. But beneath the polish, I saw something new in her eyes, a heaviness, a quiet dread. "Yvonne," she said coolly, "this is unexpected. I hope everything is all right with Amara and Elliot." "That's what I need to talk to you about," I said softly. "May I come in?" She hesitated, just for a second, then stepped aside. "Of course. Let's go to the sitting room." The sitting room looked like a page torn from a luxury magazine. Velvet drapes, marble fireplace, antique furniture placed with mathematical precision. Portraits of ancestors lined the walls, watching silently from their golden frames. Everything was elegant, controlled, intimidating. Harriet took her seat in a high-backed chair that looked more like a throne than something meant for comfort, and gestured for me to sit across from her. Even the space between us felt intentional, a reminder of where we each stood in her carefully ordered world. "Now then," she said, folding her hands in her lap, "what's this urgent family matter?" I placed the manila folder on the table between us. My fingers trembled. There was no gentle way to do this. "Mrs. Whitmore," I began quietly, "I need to show you something. I discovered it by accident, and I've spent the past week confirming every detail. I wish I didn't have to be the one to tell you this, but—" I drew a steady breath. "Amara and Elliot have been taking money from your accounts." Her face froze. "Excuse me?" "They've been transferring large sums from your personal accounts, hidden as business investments and consulting fees. Over the past 8 months, it totals more than $47,000. I pulled out the printed statements and slid them across the table. "These are copies of the transfers into Amara's interior design business." Harriet leaned forward, scanning the papers. Her expression remained unreadable. "This shows money going to Amara's company," she said carefully. "I've been supporting their ventures. That's hardly theft." "With respect, Mrs. Whitmore," I said, my voice trembling but steady, "did you personally authorize these transfers? Did you know the funds weren't being used for the business, but for vacations and luxury expenses?" Her brow furrowed. I opened the next set of pages, the cross-referenced bank activity, each transfer matched with photographs and timestamps from social media. "Here," I said, pointing to the dates. "Funds withdrawn the same day they visited Napa, another the week they posted photos from the spa retreat." Harriet's face grew pale as she scanned the evidence. "These dates?" she murmured. "Elliot told me he needed funds for a major architectural project. He said it would benefit all of us." I shook my head gently. "I spoke with his firm yesterday. They've received nearly $28,000 from your accounts, labeled as consulting fees. But there are no records, no contracts, and no work performed. Even his staff is confused about where the money's coming from." The color drained completely from her cheeks. She lifted one of the statements with shaking fingers, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't understand. Amara's been helping me manage my finances. She said the funds were for investments, for our family's future. That's how it starts, I said quietly. They gain your trust. They make themselves indispensable, and once they have control, they use that access for their own benefit. I turned the final page, the screenshots from Amara's private social media accounts. Harriet's eyes scanned the words silently, her lips parting as she read her daughter-in-law's cruel jokes about managing the old lady's money and keeping her happy while funding our lifestyle. The silence that followed was suffocating. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. "She calls me the old lady," Harriet whispered finally. Her voice cracked. "She jokes about me, having a heart attack if I ever found out." "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Whitmore," I said softly. "I know how painful this must be." But her grief hardened into something else, something colder. When she looked up, her eyes were no longer weary. They were sharp, blazing with fury. "They made a fool of me," she said through clenched teeth, "in my own home, at my own table. They made me believe I was a generous matriarch, while they were robbing me blind." "There's more," I said quietly. "I believe what they did to me that night. The way Amara had me serve you, clean for you, treat you like royalty, was part of the act. They wanted you to feel powerful, adored, and grateful. That made their requests for money seem natural, as if helping them was simply part of your role as the family's benefactor." Harriet said nothing, but the look on her face told me she understood. For the first time since I'd met her, the mask of control had cracked, and what showed beneath it was something raw, wounded, and dangerous. Harriet's eyes burned with fury and understanding. "They used you," she said quietly. Then, with growing venom, "They used both of us." "Yes," I replied, "and I think they plan to keep doing it for as long as they can." Harriet stood abruptly, walking to the tall window that overlooked her perfect garden. The late afternoon light caught the sharp lines of her profile. When she turned back, her expression was pure steel. "How much in total?" I glanced down at my notes. "From what I can confirm, around $75,000 over the last 8 months. But Mrs. Whitmore, this scheme is organized. There might be more that hasn't surfaced yet." She nodded slowly, her jaw tightening. "I want to confront them. Tonight." I blinked. "Are you sure that's wise? Maybe you should speak to your attorney first." "No," she interrupted, her voice cold and unshakable. "I want to see their faces when they realize the game is over. I want them to know that the foolish old woman they've been manipulating isn't so helpless after all." She crossed the room, pulled open an antique desk drawer, and took out her phone. "I'll call them now," she said. "I'll tell them I want a family dinner, something about finances. They'll come. They won't be able to resist another chance to control the situation." Her fingers danced across the screen. I could hear Amara's voice, bright and sugary through the speaker. "Harriet? What a lovely surprise. How are you feeling?" "I'm doing well, dear," Harriet replied smoothly. "I was hoping you and Elliot could come for dinner tonight. There are some financial matters I'd like to discuss." There was a pause. "Financial matters? Is everything okay?" "Oh, yes," Harriet said lightly. "I've been reviewing a few accounts and I'd value your guidance. You know how much I trust your judgment with these complicated things." I could practically hear the greed spark in Amara's tone. "Of course, Harriet. We'd be delighted to help. What time works for you?" 7 o'clock. And Amara, don't bring Yvonne this time. I think we'll keep it just the immediate family." Another pause, this one shorter. "Absolutely," Amara said. "Just the 3 of us. We'll see you at 7. When Harriet ended the call, a faint, icy smile touched her lips. "They're coming," she said. "They think it's another opportunity to get close, another chance to take advantage. They have no idea what's waiting for them." "What will you do?" I asked. "What will you say to them?" Her smile sharpened. "I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. But first," she said, reaching for her landline, "I need to make a few calls. My lawyer, my banker, and my accountant. By the time dinner's over, this won't just be a conversation. It'll be the beginning of consequences." She paused, then turned toward me. For the first time since I'd arrived, her expression softened. "Yvonne," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology. The way I treated you at that dinner, letting them humiliate you, I understand now that it was part of their manipulation, but it doesn't excuse my behavior. You didn't deserve that." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. "Will you stay for dinner tonight?" she asked. "You've earned the right to see how this ends." I looked at this woman, the same one who had once handed me her coat without a word, who had treated me like background furniture in my own daughter's home, and now she was offering me a front-row seat to justice. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think I'd like that very much." 7 o'clock arrived like a storm. I sat in Harriet's sitting room, half hidden behind the open French doors that led to her study, listening for the sound of tires on gravel. When the sleek silver BMW appeared at the end of the drive, my pulse spiked. The car glided up the circular path like a serpent made of steel and money. Through the window, I watched as my daughter stepped out first, perfectly styled, draped in silk. Elliot followed, adjusting his designer tie. They looked like the picture of success, the image of a couple who had everything because they'd taken it. Harriet had spent the afternoon on the phone, setting traps with quiet precision. Her lawyer, her banker, her accountant, all now aware of what was coming. This wasn't just dinner anymore. This was a reckoning. As we prepared, she'd told me, "They need to see that the people they manipulated weren't weak, just trusting. That's the difference." I heard the front door open, followed by Amara's bright, practiced voice. "Harriet, you look wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting us over." "Elliot," Harriet greeted smoothly. "It's good of you both to come on such short notice." "Of course," Elliot replied warmly. "We're always happy to help with anything financial." Their voices drifted into the dining room, muffled by distance, but every word edged with tension. Harriet had set the table with her finest china and crystal, the same pieces that had once symbolized her wealth and control. Now, they'd become the stage for something very different. From my seat in the study, I watched through the doorway as Harriet took her place at the head of the table, calm, composed, terrifyingly still. "I hope you don't mind," she said politely, "but I've asked my lawyer to join us by phone later. There are some documents I'd like to review while we're all here." For the first time, I heard it, the faint crack in Amara's confident tone. "Documents?" she repeated, a note of strain in her voice. "Yes," Harriet replied coolly. "I think it's time we go over a few things, together. Investment papers, account authorizations, things like that," Harriet said lightly, folding her hands. "I'm trying to get better organized. You know how scatterbrained I can be." Elliot laughed. The sound made my skin crawl. "You? Scattered? You've always been sharp about business, Mother." "Have I?" Harriet asked, a little hollowly. "Sometimes I wonder." There was a careful pause. "There are transactions in my accounts I don't remember authorizing," she said, voice steady now. "Large transfers I thought I approved, but the details are fuzzy." I held my breath, waiting for them to react. "That's perfectly normal," Amara replied, silky and practiced. "You handle so many accounts. You asked us to help keep track." "Yes, I asked for help," Harriet admitted, "but I don't remember asking for this much help." The temperature in the room dropped. Tension pulsed like a low electric current through the air. "I'm not sure I follow," Elliot said carefully. "Oh, I think you understand perfectly," Harriet cut in. The frail act was gone. Her voice was steel. "I think you understand exactly how much help you've been giving yourselves from my accounts." The silence that followed felt like a held breath. "Harriet," Amara began, thin and sharp, "I don't know what you mean." "I think you've stolen over $75,000 from me in 8 months, Harriet said, each word deliberate. "I think you used access to my accounts to fund your lifestyle while pretending to be devoted family." A chair screeched. Elliot's voice came out strained. "Mother, that's a serious accusation. If there's a misunderstanding—" "There is no misunderstanding," Harriet replied without flinch. "I have bank records, transaction histories, documentation of every dollar." She reached for a paper and slid it forward. I have screenshots of social media posts where you joke about how easy it is to manipulate the old lady, laughing about my having a heart attack if I found out." Something in the room shattered. The sound of crystal breaking, a wine glass spilling, a visible crack in their composure. That was my cue. I rose from the study and walked into the dining room, the manila folder heavy in my hands. Amara stood by the table, her face gone white, as if she'd seen a ghost. Elliot was frozen, mouth slack. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth like a dark stain. "Hello, Amara," I said softly. Her head snapped toward me. Panic and fury waged across her features. "What is she doing here?" she demanded, glaring at Harriet. "She's the one who brought this to me," Harriet said calmly. "She arrived with evidence that you've been stealing from my accounts. Unlike some people, she still has a conscience." Amara's face contorted with rage. "She's lying," she spat. "She's trying to turn you against us because I wouldn't let her boss me around like a servant." I almost laughed at the audacity. "No, Amara, you insisted I treat Mrs. Whitmore like an employer. You told me she was rich and I should know my place." "That's not how it happened," Amara snapped. "It is exactly how it happened," Harriet interrupted. "You conditioned her to feel small and useful so she wouldn't question the help you were taking. You made me feel generous while you picked my pockets." Elliot finally found his voice. "Mother, please, if some transfer was wrong, it happened without my knowledge." "Don't," Harriet said, her voice gone deadly still. "Don't you dare try to blame this on your wife while pretending you knew nothing," Harriet said, her voice low but lethal. "Your firm has been receiving payments for projects that don't exist. Your own staff called to ask about them." Elliot's composure crumbled. The game was over, and he knew it. Amara's voice broke the silence. "What do you want from us?" Harriet smiled, slow and cold. "I want my money back. Every dollar. I want you both to sign written admissions of what you've done, and I want you to understand that you will never, ever have access to my finances again." "And if we refuse?" Elliot asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then my lawyer files charges tomorrow morning," Harriet said, calm as glass. "Financial exploitation, fraud, the works. You'll both be facing consequences you can't talk your way out of." The fight drained out of Amara all at once. Her shoulders fell, and for the first time in her life, she looked small, trapped. "How much time do we have?" Elliot asked quietly. 72 hours, Harriet replied, "to return every cent and sign the statements. After that, it's out of my hands." I watched my daughter's face as reality hit her. This was the same woman who had humiliated me in her kitchen, who had told me I was only useful as a servant, who had erased me from her life when I refused to bow. Now she was the one being forced to kneel, not to power but to truth. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I didn't. Instead, I felt a deep, aching sadness. This broken woman standing before us was still the child I had raised, the little girl who used to cling to me after nightmares. Even now, even after everything, part of me grieved the daughter I thought I had, the one who never truly existed. But beneath that grief, something stronger was stirring, something I hadn't felt in years. Self-respect. Harriet looked across the wrecked dinner table at me, her eyes steady and bright. "Yvonne," she said softly, "I owe you more than I can ever say, not just for uncovering what they did, but for reminding me that I deserve better than to be surrounded by people who see me as a wallet, not a person." Amara's head snapped toward us, eyes wide, horrified. For the first time she understood. She hadn't just lost her victim. She had created an alliance between the two women she'd tried to pit against each other. "Mom," she whispered, tears streaking her face, "I made mistakes, but I'm still your daughter. Don't let her destroy our family." I looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her, and I saw flashes of the past. The little girl who once climbed into my lap, the young woman who used to call for advice, the daughter I had loved beyond reason. Then I saw the truth. "You destroyed our family," I said quietly. "The day you decided I was only valuable as a tool. You lost me when you stopped seeing me as a mother and started treating me like staff." 3 months later, I was sitting in Harriet's sunroom, sunlight streaming across a table filled with new beginnings. We were reviewing applications for a property management position, a business Harriet had invited me to run with her, not for her, a partnership built on trust and respect. The work was fulfilling, steady, honest, and dignified. For the first time in years, I was seen for my skills and paid fairly for them. As for Amara and Elliot, they returned most of the stolen money and signed the admission papers to avoid prosecution. Their marriage didn't survive the scandal. Elliot filed for divorce within weeks, claiming he'd been manipulated by his wife. They lost their house, their cars, nearly everything they'd once flaunted online. Amara tried calling me afterward, sometimes apologetic, sometimes angry. I never picked up. There was nothing left to say, because I had finally found something she couldn't steal: my dignity. For the first time in decades, at 64 years old, I was truly free. Free from manipulation, free from guilt, free from the need to earn love by serving others. Harriet and I became unlikely friends, two women from very different worlds, bound by shared betrayal and survival. We were no longer victims. We were proof that no matter your age or your past, it's never too late to stand up and reclaim your worth. Now, I'm curious about you, the person who's listened to my story all the way to the end. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved and found the strength to move on? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I read everyone. And before you go, I'm leaving 2 more stories on your screen. Both true, both unforgettable. Watch them next, because each one will make you see family, trust, and forgiveness in a very different light. Thank you for staying with me until the end.